I mean, think about it like this. If you were going to build a career in something like accounting, right?
Mm.
Or structural engineering, or even plumbing.
Right, something practical.
Yeah, exactly. There is this underlying expectation of a very clear, rigid ladder. You know, you go to a trade school or a university,
Hmm.
you get some kind of certification, you apprentice under someone who actually knows what they're doing.
Put in the hours?
You put in the hours, and eventually some boss points at a desk or a blueprint or a pipe and just says, there is your career, just follow the steps.
It's incredibly visible. It's predictable. And human beings naturally gravitate toward that kind of predictable progression.
We really do.
We want the map laid out on the table before we even start the car.
Right. But then you step into the world of stand-up comedy in 2026, and suddenly you realize the map isn't just outdated. I mean, the map is actively on fire.
It's completely incinerated.
Yeah. So if you are listening to this right now and you are trying to build a stand-up comedy career from scratch, you are looking at a landscape that feels less like a corporate ladder and more like a massive underground mycelium network.
That's a great way to put it.
It's sprawling, it's completely invisible to the naked eye, and it is just incredibly difficult to know where to even plant yourself. Like, where do you even begin when all the old institutions are fracturing?
Well, that is the exact dilemma facing anyone holding a microphone today.
Welcome to the deep dive, by the way.
Oh yeah, welcome to the deep dive. We are getting right into it today.
We really are. Because the historical blueprint, you know, the one where you start as a club host, you grind for maybe 5 years to become a feature act, and then magically get handed a headlining weekend, that is completely dead.
It's just gone.
Completely disintegrated. Professional success in stand-up today, in 2026, isn't just a matter of being the funniest person in the room anymore.
Which is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of funny people. It is. Because it demands this brutal yet, incredibly rewarding alchemy of actual stagecraft, relentless decentralized networking, and a level of logistical professionalism that most people, frankly, never associate with comedians.
Right, because the stereotype is always, the chaotic artist sleeping until noon on a stained mattress.
Exactly, the chaotic genius.
Yeah, but looking at the data we have today, and we have a massive stack of sources for this deep dive.
We do. We are pulling from everywhere.
Yeah, we've got academic research on career structures, tips from actual booking agents, DIY marketing guides, crowd work manuals, and just raw, unfiltered advice from festival organizers.
And when you synthesize all of that, the comic of 2026 is essentially operating as a small business in a highly volatile market.
A small business where the product is your own personality.
Exactly. And a huge part of this shift is how you interact with the people sitting in the seats.
Mm.
You are no longer performing at an audience.
Right.
You have to perform with them.
Which requires a completely different psychological approach to being on stage.
It really does.
Yeah.
But before you can even think about how you talk to an audience.
Or how you, market yourself on TikTok.
Right, or how you submit a tape to a massive comedy festival.
Mm-hmm.
Before all of that, you have to understand the actual invisible structure of the industry itself.
The mycelium network.
The network, exactly. You mentioned the ladder earlier. Well, the most vital paradigm shift you have to make right now, today, is realizing that your career is no longer a ladder you just climb up and leave behind.
Okay, so what is it?
It is a series of interconnected layers.
A series of interconnected layers. Okay, let's dig into the actual mechanics of that, because the academic research we pulled on this is fascinating.
It's eye-opening.
There is this massive 5-year ethnographic study of the Los Angeles comedy scene by Patrick Riley.
Yes, Riley's work is foundational here.
Right, because he essentially spent years just observing comics, because comedy doesn't have an HR department,
There's no onboarding packet.
No, there's no corporate training program. So how does a total novice actually integrate into this weird world?
Well, Riley observed that comedians progress through 3 distinct overlapping layers. And the very first one is what he calls the proximate layer.
The proximate layer. So paint a picture for us. What does that actually look like?
Okay, think about the absolute ground floor of comedy. You walk into an open mic at, say, a coffee shop, or the back room of a comic book store, or some sticky dive bar on a Tuesday night.
God, I can smell the stale beer already.
Right. And there are maybe 4 real audience members in the entire room and 20 other aspiring comics nervously holding notebooks.
It is deeply alienating.
Oh, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
And the established comics in the room, they will likely completely ignore you.
Which feels personal when you're new.
It feels awful.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily out of malice. It's out of self-preservation. Statistically speaking, they assume you will quit in 6 months.
It's an energy conservation thing. Like, why invest emotional energy in someone who is going to wash out before Christmas?
Exactly. So out of sheer necessity and just physical proximity, the novices start forming tight-knit cliques. You find your comedy buddies.
The people who are just as terrified as you were.
Yes. This is the proximate layer. It acts as a localized safety net.
But, okay, let me push back on that idea for a second.
Go for it.
Because if you are listening to this and you are an ambitious comic, your instinct is probably to network up.
Of course. You want to skip the line.
Right. You want to go talk to the headliner. You want to corner the booker, the person who can actually get you paid. If you spend all your time just huddled in the back of the room with 3 other open micers who are just as broke and clueless as you are, aren't you just pooling ignorance?
I mean, it looks like pooling ignorance from the outside, sure, but structurally, it's an essential incubation chamber.
How so?
These cliques are where novices pool crucial survival information. I mean, they tell each other which open mics are actual scams.
Oh, like the ones that make you buy a $15 quesadilla to get stage time?
Exactly. The bringer shows, the drink minimums. They tell you which mics actually have real audiences and which club owners to actively avoid.
So it's an intelligence network.
Yes. But more importantly, the proximate layer is a creative sandbox. The research highlights a really great example of this.
Oh, the car riffing thing.
Yes. 2 early career comics are just sitting in a car and they're riffing about a billboard for a Shakespeare movie.
Like it's a Michael Bay film or something.
Right. They start treating it like a modern blockbuster, pitching these cheesy, ridiculous taglines to each other, just constantly escalating the absurdity.
They're just messing around, basically.
They are just messing around, but neurologically, they are developing the reflex of comedy without the high stakes of a paying audience.
Oh, that makes sense.
They are learning how to construct setups and punchlines in a perfectly safe environment. I mean, if a joke completely fails in that car, nobody loses a gig. Nobody gets booed.
You just get a groan from your friend and you move on.
Exactly. You need that psychological safety to build your initial confidence.
Okay, I see that. The clique is the laboratory. But the problem with a laboratory is that it's a completely controlled environment.
Right. It's not the real world.
Yeah, if you only ever test your jokes on your 3 best friends, you run into what the research calls the echo chamber effect.
And this is the primary danger of the proximate layer. If you stay there too long, you develop a really bizarre, insular style of comedy.
Like inside jokes that only make sense if you know the guy sitting in the back row.
Exactly. Your jokes rely on references that only your friends understand. You get this false sense of security because your buddies are dying laughing, but the moment you step in front of actual strangers,
Material completely collapses. Crickets.
total silence. Which means you have to eventually step out of the car. You have to push into the second structural tier, the community layer.
The community layer. And this is where the goalposts completely shift, right? Because in the proximate layer, you're just looking for acceptance from your peers, just a feeling of belonging.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in the community layer, you are in active pursuit of peer esteem.
Ah.
You are moving beyond your immediate circle, and you are actively trying to impress the local insiders.
So who are the insiders in 2026?
The showcase bookers, the specialty journalists who cover the indie scene,
Yeah.
the local podcast hosts, and the hardcore comedy fans who show up to indie rooms every single weekend.
The comedy nerds.
The nerds. And these are people with highly, highly calibrated comedic palates. They have seen thousands of hours of stand-up.
So you really can't just slide by on cheap shock humor or like old street jokes.
No, absolutely not. They will see right through you. This is where you actually forge your distinct voice. And I have to be honest, it is a grueling process.
The industry cites the 10-year rule.
Yeah, the 10-year rule.
Yep.
It takes roughly a decade of grinding in this community layer to strip away your initial influences.
To stop sounding like a poor imitation of Dave Chappelle or John Mulaney.
Exactly. To discover how you uniquely sound when you speak into a microphone.
A decade just to find your voice. I mean, that is a sobering timeline for anyone listening right now who thought they'd have a Netflix special by, year 3.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
But let's assume you survive that decade. You find your voice. You actually earn the respect of the community layer. What is the final destination in this structure?
That would be the industrial layer.
The industrial layer.
This is the elite tier. This is where you are actually making a sustainable professional living through your craft.
The dream.
Right. You are a national touring headliner or you are staffing television writing rooms, or you are booking acting gigs.
So the people you're talking to every day completely change.
Yes. Your daily interactions shift from local indie bookers to actual entertainment executives, high-level agents, and massive corporate promoters. The goal shifts from peer esteem to actual widespread renown and, frankly, maintaining a profitable business.
Okay, so we have proximate, community, industrial.
Correct.
Now, I know you said earlier this isn't a ladder, but structurally, it really, really sounds like a ladder. You start at the bottom, you climb through the middle, and you reach the top. So why shouldn't a comic view it that way?
Because if you treat it like a ladder and you kick away the rungs once you climb past them, your career will inevitably collapse.
Oh, wow.
This is perhaps the most crucial reality of a 2026 comedy career. You never actually leave a layer. Progression means building a durable infrastructure. Let's call it the yo-yo effect.
The yo-yo effect, meaning you constantly drop back down.
Exactly. Even when a comedian reaches the absolute pinnacle of the industrial layer, let's say they are preparing to shoot a massive arena special.
Like Madison Square Garden level.
Right. They constantly yo-yo back down to the proximate and community layers.
But why? If you're playing arenas, why go back to a coffee shop?
Because the industrial layer is a terrible, terrible place to create new art. The stakes are simply too high.
Oh, that makes sense. You can't experiment when people paid $80 to see you.
You cannot walk onto a theater stage where people paid that kind of money and just stumble through half-baked premises off a yellow legal pad.
They'd riot. They'd demand a refund.
They would. So superstars actively return to those sweaty 50-seat rooms in the community layer. They drop in unannounced to test new material anonymously.
They need the clinical testing ground.
They need that immediate, low-stakes, highly critical feedback from a room full of strangers who aren't totally blinded by their fame.
And the research points out they do the exact same thing with the proximate layer, too.
Yes, they do.
When massive stars finally break through and get their own sitcom or movie, who do they hire for their writing rooms?
They don't just hire random industry veterans.
No, they hire their old comedy buddies. The sources we have highlight people like Amy Schumer or the comics studied in that LA ethnography. When they finally secure the big budget, they bring their original clique up with them.
Because they already share a creative language.
They have that shortcut.
They have the shortcut, and they share absolute trust. They know that the buddy they were riffing with in the car 10 years ago isn't going to filter their feedback through Hollywood politics.
They'll just say, hey, that joke sucks.
Exactly. They will just tell them the truth. Your career is a layered infrastructure. The proximate layer is your permanent safety net. The community layer is your clinical testing ground. And the industrial layer is where you actually monetize the results.
So the clique is the laboratory, the community is the clinical trial, and the industry is the mass market release.
That's a perfect way to summarize it.
It really reframes the entire daily grind, doesn't it? If you're listening to this, you aren't just wasting time at an open mic. You are literally building the foundation you will rely on 10 years from now.
Every terrible set is a brick in the foundation.
But let's look closely at that critical transition point. Moving from the proximate layer, making your friends laugh in a diner at 2 a.m. to the community layer where you have to make a room full of skeptical strangers laugh.
That's the crucible.
The sources are very clear that this transition requires a massive, massive upgrade in actual stagecraft.
You have to shed the amateur habits immediately. There's no more hand-holding. The booking guides we looked at, like the one from the regional organizers Louisville Laughs, they lay out fundamental rules for this transition.
And the first rule is pretty blunt.
First and foremost, the material has to be about you.
Right. Not generic observations.
Exactly. Audiences in 2026 have infinite entertainment options right in their pockets. They do not want generic, detached observational humor about, like, airplane food or the DMV.
Where the differences between cats and dogs.
Right. It's been done to death. They want a unique point of view.
They want to know the psychology of the specific person holding the microphone. And there's another technical rule they really hammer home, and this seems so obvious, but you see it constantly at open mics.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Do not read notes on stage. Do not bring your phone up there and scroll through your premises.
It is an absolute momentum killer.
Right, but I want to unpack that. Why does it kill the momentum so completely? What is the actual psychological mechanism happening in the room? Because realistically, the audience knows you wrote these jokes beforehand, right?
Of course they do.
They know it's a rehearsed performance, so why does looking at a screen completely ruin the vibe?
Well, it shatters what theater directors call the illusion of the first time.
The illusion of the first time. I love that phrase.
Because stand-up comedy is a highly unnatural act that is desperately pretending to be a natural conversation.
Yeah, you're standing under a spotlight with a microphone. It's not natural.
Exactly. The performer is attempting to make a meticulously crafted, mathematically precise paragraph sound like a spontaneous thought that just occurred to them in that exact second.
Hey, you know what I was just thinking about on the drive over here?
Right. And when you break eye contact with the audience to stare at a glowing rectangle in your hand, you remind them that they are just watching a recitation.
The spell is broken.
The conversational spell is totally broken. You transition instantly from being a charismatic host throwing a party to being a nervous student giving a book report.
Oh man, a book report. That's a brutal comparison, but it's so accurate. It's a complete shift in authority. You lose your presence in the room, and presence is inextricably linked to confidence.
You have to command the space.
The guides talk about how you have to genuinely believe the audience is going to laugh, but there is a razor-thin line between confidence and arrogance.
A very thin line.
They specifically warn against the comic who bombs week after week with the same dense, overly intellectual material, but walks off stage thinking, well, I'm a genius. The audience is just too stupid to get my art.
That is a fatal mindset if you are trying to survive in the community layer.
It's delusional.
It is. The audience is the ultimate objective judge of comedy. If they're not laughing, it is not comedy. It's just a speech.
Which brings us to arguably the most terrifying, high-wire act of stagecraft for any newer comic: crowd work.
Yes, crowd work.
Now, if you're listening and you're relatively new to the scene, you might think of crowd work as just a stalling tactic, right? Like it's what you do when you totally forget your next written joke.
You panic and ask someone where they're from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or you associate it with those aggressive insult comic clips that always go viral on social media, where the performer just ruthlessly roasts someone in the front row for their outfit.
The purely combative style.
Yeah.
No.
But we read The Funny Muscle Manual by Michael Halcomb and Mike Lucas, and it completely reframes this entire concept.
It really does. They elevate crowd work from a defensive panic mechanism to a proactive, high-level job skill.
A tool you use on purpose.
Yes. It is the ability to generate live, improvised humor using the audience as your raw material. This is exactly what we meant earlier by transitioning from performing at the audience to performing with them.
Let's get into the deep mechanics of this, because the specific techniques they outline in that manual are incredible.
Very actionable.
Yeah. The very first tool they teach, and they actually call this the absolute cheat code of crowd work, is getting names.
Such a simple thing, but so effective.
Why is asking an audience member for their name so disproportionately powerful? Like, why does that matter so much?
Because of human neuroscience, honestly. Our brains are hardwired to prioritize the sound of our own names above almost any other audio input in a crowded room.
The cocktail party effect.
Exactly. So when you are sitting in a dark comedy club, you are in a passive observational state. The moment the comic points at you and asks your name, your adrenaline spikes.
You're suddenly in the spotlight.
You are suddenly pulled onto the stage psychologically. But the real magic isn't just for that one person. The real magic happens for the rest of the room.
How so?
Because when the comic gets the name Brenda from a woman in the second row, right, and then say 15 minutes later, during a completely unrelated written joke about corporate incompetence, the comic seamlessly weaves in, right, Brenda?
Oh, the room erupts.
They absolutely erupt.
It hits so much harder than the written punchline would have on its own.
It does, because it creates an immediate sense of exclusivity. That specific joke with that specific reference to Brenda has never happened before and will never happen again in the history of the universe.
Lightning in a bottle.
It makes the entire audience feel like they are part of this massive inside joke that only exists in that room on that specific night. It transforms a standard, rote performance into a bespoke experience.
It's brilliant, just using a name. And another mechanical technique they broke down in the manual is the simple act of repeating what the audience says.
Yes, the repetition trick.
If you watch a master crowdwork comic, they almost always repeat the audience member's answer directly into the microphone. Like, I used to think they just had bad hearing.
Right. What do you do for a living? I'm an accountant.
An accountant, okay.
Yeah, exactly like that. But there is a three-part engineering reason behind this, isn't there? Yes. It serves three distinct simultaneous functions. First, it's just basic acoustic logistics. The person sitting in the very back row cannot hear what the guy in the front row just mumbled.
Obviously.
If you just react to an inaudible statement, half the room feels totally left out of the joke. Repeating it loops everyone into the premise.
It's about inclusion.
Exactly. Second, it validates the audience member. It shows you are actively listening to them, which builds trust. But the third reason is arguably the most critical for the comedian. It buys your brain 3 to 4 glorious seconds of processing time.
Oh man, the processing time.
Yes, while your mouth is automatically saying the word accountant, your subconscious is just wildly scanning your mental database for every premise, angle, and punchline you have ever written related to math, spreadsheets, and boring offices.
It's literally like a buffering icon for your brain.
Precisely. It allows you to load the joke without letting any dead air suck the energy out of the room.
Now, here is where the manual introduces a concept pulled directly from the world of theatrical improvisation.
Ah, the yes and.
The yes and technique. Because the rookie instinct in crowd work is almost always adversarial. The comic feels threatened by the interruption, so they attack.
They get defensive.
They treat the audience member like an opponent to be defeated. But the professional move is to treat them as a scene partner. You agree with their reality and you heighten it.
The manual provides a perfect structural example of this in action. Let's say you are interacting with a slightly boisterous guy in the crowd. You ask what he does, and he proudly announces he is a firefighter.
Okay, a firefighter.
Now, if you immediately go into insult comic mode and roast him for his weight or his haircut, you risk turning the entire room against you instantly.
Because society likes firefighters. They run into burning buildings to save kittens.
Right. If you attack him unprovoked, you become the villain of the show.
The demographic friction is just way too high.
Exactly. So instead, you yes and him. You accept his reality, he's a firefighter, and you pivot it to serve the tension in the room. You say something like, a firefighter. Well, that explains why you're burning through my patience.
Oh, that is so elegant.
It works perfectly.
You acknowledge his status, but you completely reassert your control over the room's tempo, and it releases the tension with a laugh rather than aggression.
And master comics take this even a step further by building what the manual calls mini narratives.
Mini narratives, like connecting the dots across the room.
Exactly, connecting the dots. If you do crowd work with, say, a high school principal sitting in the front row, and then 10 minutes later you find a guy in the back row who admits he dropped out of high school.
You don't just treat those as two isolated interactions.
No, you weave them together. You build a spontaneous bridge between them, turning the audience members into characters in a shared, overarching narrative for the night.
It really, really reminds me of a dungeon master in a tabletop role-playing game like Dungeons & Dragons.
That's a fascinating comparison.
Think about it. The players, in this case the audience, keep throwing chaotic, unpredictable variables at you, and your job isn't to yell at them for ruining your pre-written campaign. Your job is to gently, humorously absorb their input and guide that chaotic energy right back into the overarching narrative of your set list.
That is a very accurate way to look at it.
Yeah.
You are constantly managing chaotic variables, but effectively managing those variables requires extreme situational awareness.
You have to know where you are.
You have to understand the context of the room you are standing in. The Louisville Laughs source discusses the vital importance of reading the room before you even speak your first word.
And they give a very stark example of this.
They do.
They describe a scenario where a comic walks into a VFW post to perform, and half the audience happens to be wearing red Maguire hats. The objective advice in the guide is simple. This is probably not the optimal room to test out your 15-minute, highly critical anti-Trump chunk.
No, it is not.
And to be completely clear to you listening, from an objective analytical standpoint, this advice has absolutely nothing to do with endorsing or condemning any political viewpoint. Both left-wing and right-wing content, we're just reporting impartially here.
Right. It's not about the politics themselves.
It is purely about the cold, hard mechanics of live performance.
It's about demographic alignment and friction.
Exactly. It simply means you must adapt to the specific demographic sitting in front of you. If you launch into material that actively antagonizes the core beliefs of the room before you've established any trust whatsoever, you alienate the crowd.
You lose them instantly.
And you fail at the primary objective of the community layer connection.
If you intentionally step on a landmine just because you refuse to read the room, you aren't being brave. You are just being a bad performer.
Yeah, you're not a martyr. You're just bombing.
Exactly. You have to observe the audience, watch how they react to the host, watch what jokes land for the feature act, and adjust your set list, the specific tools you pull out of your toolbox accordingly.
Okay, so let's kind of put this all together so far. If you are building this career from scratch, you've established your proximate safety net with your buddies.
Jack.
You've stepped into the community layer. You are highly present on stage. You aren't reading off your phone like a weirdo.
Check.
You're calling back to Brenda from accounting. You are a Jedi dungeon master of crowd work, weaving the whole room together. You have found your distinct voice after a decade of grinding. You are objectively a good comedian.
You have the skills.
You have the skills.
Yeah.
Here is the massive roadblock. You are still completely exhausted from waiting for some club booker to mercifully grant you a Tuesday night guest spot.
A waiting game.
If you have the skills, how do you actually bypass the gatekeepers and get people into the seats in 2026?
Well, this brings us to what is arguably the most significant structural shift in the modern industry. The DIY revolution.
The DIY revolution.
For decades, the path to the industrial layer was entirely dependent on a handful of gatekeepers.
The kingmakers.
Right. You waited for an agent to discover you. You waited for a talent scout from a festival like Just for Laughs to anoint you. You prayed a late-night TV booker just happened to be standing in the back of the room on a good night.
The power dynamic was entirely top-down.
But comedian Zach Lyman's 2025 manifesto on the future of stand-up details how that power has radically decentralized. The leverage has shifted entirely to the creators.
And Zach Lyman is the perfect case study for this, isn't he?
He really is.
Because he didn't wait for a major network like Comedy Central or Netflix to offer him a special. He literally built his career by self-booking his own independent tours.
Total ownership.
He fronted the money himself, he rented the venues, he marketed the shows, and then he filmed his own specials like Delightful and The Big Laugh and distributed them directly to platforms like Amazon Prime. He bypassed the middleman completely.
He proved that the DIY approach is no longer just like a cute backup plan for comics who can't get booked in real clubs.
It's not plan B anymore.
No, it is the primary, most lucrative business model available right now. By utilizing platforms like Eventbrite for ticketing, Patreon for recurring fan revenue, and direct-to-fan digital marketing, comedians are cultivating these hyper-niche, intensely loyal audiences.
It's a completely different scale.
It is. The old model required you to appeal to millions of casual viewers through a television broadcast. The 2026 model requires you to find a few thousand dedicated fans scattered across the country who will gladly buy a $30 ticket when you rent an indie theater in their city.
Right. But the million-dollar question for anyone listening is, how do you actually find those specific few thousand people?
That is the trick.
And reading through the marketing strategy guides we have for 2026, the answer is overwhelmingly clear. Visibility means TikTok.
It always comes back to TikTok.
It does. But we need to clarify this for the audience because this is not the TikTok of 2021. You aren't just, doing a synchronized dance or pointing at floating text bubbles while a trending pop song plays.
Thank goodness.
Seriously. The mechanics of the platform have fundamentally changed.
The Influence Marketing Report for 2026 paints a very precise picture of this evolution. TikTok is no longer just a passive entertainment feed. It has evolved into a primary search engine.
A search engine? Like Google?
Yes. Users are not just scrolling mindlessly to kill time anymore. They are actively typing queries into the search bar. They're researching topics, seeking out specific types of stories, and looking for genuine human connection.
Which completely changes how you make videos.
Entirely. Because of this shift in user behavior, highly produced, heavily polished, sales-centric videos actively fail.
They trigger a sort of ad blindness, right?
Exactly, ad blindness. If your video looks like a traditional commercial, the user's brain filters it out instantly as an intrusion, and they swipe away before you even finish your sentence.
So the marketing guides stress that to survive this algorithm, you have to optimize for TikTok SEO, search engine optimization.
Which sounds like corporate tech jargon.
It sounds so boring, but for a comedian, it means the platform is literally listening to what you say. The algorithm categorizes the specific keywords in your captions, the text on your screen, and the actual spoken words in your audio track.
It's transcribing you.
Yeah. If a user searches for stand-up comedy about bad dates, and you haven't optimized your video to trigger those exact keywords, you do not exist to them. You are a ghost.
And the consistency required to maintain that relevance is honestly punishing.
3 to 5 times a week, the data says.
Just to trigger compounding algorithmic growth. But beyond the technical SEO, the most critical piece of behavioral advice from that marketing data is a phrase you hear constantly. Provide value before you promote.
Provide value before you promote.
The hook of your video, literally the first 3 seconds, must immediately address a pain point, offer an intriguing narrative, or provide an emotional payoff before you ever dare mention that you have a comedy show coming up.
And this is where a lot of artists, especially comics, just hit a massive wall.
They get stuck.
Because if you are a stand-up comic, the instruction to provide educational value feels completely contradictory.
It sounds like homework.
Yeah. You aren't an investment banker giving stock tips. You aren't a software engineer teaching Python coding. How on earth do you provide value as someone who basically just tells jokes about your dysfunctional family?
Well, this is the exact friction point where comics fail to adapt to the platform. They misunderstand the definition of value in the context of art.
Okay, so redefine it for us.
In comedy, value doesn't mean a math tutorial. Value is a shared emotional resonance.
Emotional resonance.
Yes. It is a brutally honest story about a failure that makes the viewer who is watching on their phone in their bedroom feel a little less isolated in their own life.
Yeah, that's good.
Or, very frequently in the 2026 landscape, value is transparency. It's a behind-the-scenes look at the unglamorous reality of the job itself.
Pulling back the curtain on the magic trick?
Precisely. Pulling back the curtain. Showing your audience a clip of a joke that completely, utterly bombed and then sitting down to explain why it bombed.
Oh, people love that.
You love it. Showing them the terrible, cramped green room you are sitting in. Documenting the reality of traveling 6 hours in a cramped car for a $50 gig. It's about letting the audience feel invested in your actual human journey.
You're inviting them in.
When you reply to their comments with video responses, you are building a micro-community. You are providing the undeniable value of human connection and accessibility.
And the psychology of that is so incredibly powerful, because when you finally do make a video saying, hey, I rented a theater in Chicago next month, tickets are in the bio, the audience doesn't feel like they are being aggressively sold a product by a faceless corporation.
Not at all.
They feel like they are being invited to support a friend whose journey they have been emotionally invested in for 6 months.
It transitions from a cold transaction to a community event. And you can see this intentional niche community building reflected perfectly on the Future of Funny 2026 list published by Comedy Dynamics.
Let's look at that list.
The comedians who are breaking out of the community layer right now are the ones who have utilized this digital hustle to build incredibly distinct, almost hyper-specific identities online.
Right. Let's look at the specific names on that list, because it really proves that you don't have to appeal to the lowest common denominator anymore.
The broad appeal is dead.
Yeah. You have a comic like TJ, who performs his sets in a seamless blend of English, French, and Haitian Creole.
Fascinating stuff.
It is. He is tapping into a deeply specific cultural perspective that traditional club bookers might have previously dismissed as too niche. But online, that niche is massive.
It finds its people.
Or you have Erica Rhodes, who brings her background as a classically trained cellist and ballet dancer directly into her stand-up. Her posture, her timing, the musicality of her delivery, it naturally attracts an audience that appreciates that specific theatricality.
And perhaps the most striking example from that list is Brent Weinbach. The article aptly describes him as the Nathan Fielder of the stand-up world.
Oh man, his stuff is wildly experimental.
It is entirely absurdist. He literally sits at a grand piano during his special to demonstrate how simply changing the musical key transforms a joyful Christmas song into a deeply depressing Hanukkah song.
It's so weird and so funny.
It is highly intellectual, deeply strange, and absolutely not designed for a loud, drunken bachelor party at a midnight club show.
No, they would boo him off stage.
But he didn't wait for a traditional club to validate him. He built a cult following through strange web series and niche video game music podcasts long before he ever dropped his special.
What all of these comics, TJ, Erica Rhodes, Brent Weinbach, Zach Lyman, what they all have in common is that they use the digital tools of the DIY era to bypass the gatekeepers entirely. They found the specific weirdos who resonate with their specific weirdness.
They built their own ecosystem.
They created their own demand.
They did?
I love that concept so much. Find your specific weirdos. But we have to provide a reality check here.
Let's ground it.
As empowering as the DIY revolution is, traditional validation still carries immense weight in the industrial layer.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
You can't ignore the industry forever.
Right. If you want industry management, if you want international touring momentum, The major comedy festivals still exist, and breaking into them acts as a massive career accelerant.
A huge springboard.
Which brings us to the terrifying, hyper-competitive world of festival submissions in 2026.
Yes. This is where the artistic soul of comedy violently collides with cold, hard, logistical professionalism.
It's a rude awakening for a lot of artists.
It is. Because if you want to understand what the gatekeepers in the industrial layer are actually looking for, we have to look at the ultimate case study for 2026, Skankfest.
Skankfest. Okay, for anyone unfamiliar, the organizers describe it as part Mardi Gras, part punk rock basement show, and part comedy heaven.
That's a very accurate description.
The 2025 edition was held in New Orleans with a voodoo and vampires theme.
Sounds wild.
From the outside, it looks like absolute, unregulated chaos, just madness. But behind the scenes, the process of getting booked on that stage is a highly structured, ruthlessly efficient machine.
And the organizers, specifically Louis J. Gomez, speaking on the Real Ass podcast, provided a rare, unfiltered look behind the curtain at exactly how they review the mountain of submissions they receive.
The submission pile must be staggering.
It is a brutal wake-up call for any aspiring comic who thinks their art just naturally speaks for itself. They expect upwards of 1,500 submission tapes for a very limited number of slots.
1,500 tapes.
And because of that sheer crushing volume, the reviewers employ what we can call the 1-minute rule.
The 1-minute rule. This detail completely blew my mind when I read it. The festival application explicitly asks comics to submit a 3 to 8 minute tape, usually hosted on a platform like Vimeo or YouTube.
Right, standard procedure.
But Louis straight up admits that because of the volume, the reviewers are realistically only going to watch the first 60 seconds of your video. 1 minute.
60 seconds to change your life.
If you do not hook them instantly, they close the tab and your festival dreams are over for the entire year.
You have to understand the psychology of reviewer fatigue. When a human being is watching their 400th stand-up tape of the week, everything blurs into a monotonous drone.
Just a blur of brick walls and microphone stand.
Exactly. They are actively looking for an excuse to hit next so they can clear their queue and go to sleep. Therefore, to survive that first 60 seconds, the playbook outlines 2 absolute non-negotiable golden rules for your submission tape.
Hit us with rule number 1.
Rule number 1, the audio quality must be pristine.
The exact quote was, "Make sure your audio is fire." Which, I mean, seems a little unfair, right? If the joke is brilliant, who cares if the video was shot on a cracked iPhone from the back of the room?
The reviewer cares, because hollow, echoey audio creates immense cognitive friction.
Cognitive friction.
If a reviewer has to strain their ears to decipher what you are saying over the clinking of beer glasses in the back of the room, their brain has to work harder. That effort kills the rhythm and timing of your punchlines.
It ruins the timing.
But more importantly, submitting bad audio, psychologically, signals to the booker that you are an amateur who doesn't respect your own product.
Ah, it's a proxy for professionalism.
Exactly. The professional move, and really the baseline expectation in 2026, is that you get a direct audio recording from the venue's soundboard, and you meticulously sync that crisp audio to your high-definition video in editing software.
It proves you treat your comedy as an actual business enterprise.
Yes. And rule number 2, for surviving the 1-minute rule. You need a massive, undeniable punchline in the first 10 to 20 seconds of the tape.
10 to 20 seconds, that is incredibly fast.
Again, this is a countermeasure against reviewer fatigue.
Yeah.
Many newer comics want to submit a tape that shows their artistic range, you know.
Yeah, they want to set a mood.
They start the video with a slow, atmospheric 45-second story setup to show how nuanced they are.
But the reviewer never makes it to the 46th second.
Exactly. They are gone. If you take almost a minute to get to your first real laugh, the reviewer assumes you lack the technical rhythm required to hold a volatile festival crowd.
You've got to hit them hard.
You have to hit them hard, fast, and aggressively in the first 10 seconds to prove you have the technical horsepower of a working comedian. Only then will they actually settle back in their chair to watch the rest of the tape.
It is a ruthless meritocracy. But this demand for logistical professionalism extends far beyond just how you edit your video file.
Oh, it bleeds into everything.
The Louisville Laughs Guide lists a series of basic email and communication blunders that instantly disqualify comics before anyone even clicks on their Vimeo link.
It is genuinely shocking how many talented performers completely sabotage themselves because they fail at basic corporate communication.
They just can't send an email.
A primary example is sending a booking inquiry from an email address like 69champ@yahoo.com and then forgetting to sign your actual legal name at the bottom of the email.
It sounds like a joke, but bookers deal with this constantly. If you send an email like that, you are actively telling the booker, I am a chaotic liability.
Right. I might not show up.
Yeah. If you book me, I might flake, or I might offend the club owner, or I might just be a nightmare to deal with.
Another massive red flag is the marketing materials. Comics will attach these moody, highly filtered artistic photographs of themselves staring into the shadows while holding a microphone.
Looking like an indie rock album cover, or a true crime podcast.
Exactly. But the booker doesn't need an album cover. They need a clean, well-lit, high-resolution headshot with a plain background so they can easily drop it into a promotional flyer for the venue.
Make their job easy.
If you make the booker's job harder, they simply will not book you.
And the final sin of logistics, being unreachable. Comics who only check their direct messages or emails like once a week.
You can't do that.
The live entertainment industry moves at lightning speed. If a feature act gets sick on a Friday afternoon and a booker suddenly needs someone to fill a 20-minute spot that night,
They're going to text their contacts.
and they will give the gig to the comedian who replies within 5 minutes, not the arguably funnier comedian who replies 5 days later.
Availability and reliability will often trump raw talent in the early stages of the industrial layer. Just show up on time and answer your phone.
Okay, but let's paint the ideal scenario here.
The dream scenario.
You nail the logistics, you sync the soundboard audio perfectly, you hit a devastating punchline in 8 seconds flat, you use a professional email, you attach a clean headshot, and miraculously, you beat the odds and get booked to perform at Skankfest.
Congratulations.
You pack your bags, you fly to New Orleans. What happens when you actually get there? Because looking at the sources, the real value of the festival isn't the 15 minutes you spend holding the microphone on stage.
Not at all. This is where we see the yo-yo effect operating at the absolute highest level. Skankfest beautifully illustrates how the elite industrial layer loops directly back into the proximate and community layers.
Everything is connected.
The absolute core value of attending a festival like this is what the industry refers to simply as the hang.
The hang. Luis J. Gomez specifically describes Skankfest as a summer camp for comedians.
Summer camp.
The fans who buy tickets to this festival are so deeply immersed in the culture. I mean, they know the inside lore of 50 different comedy podcasts. They recognize the faces of comedians who aren't even famous yet, just from, like, YouTube thumbnails.
It creates a completely flattened social hierarchy. The traditional barriers between the performers and the audience, and between the nervous open mic rookies and the multimillionaire superstars, are completely dissolved in the hallways and the dive bars of the festival.
It's totally equalizing.
The anecdotes from the sources highlight this chaotic socialization. You have comics talking about doing the Irish goodbye, or ending up riding in a cab to the hospital with a random fan, or vomiting in a garbage can right next to a comedy legend like Doug Stanhope.
The Doug Stanhope story is iconic.
They even host an Irish Kai beer pong tournament, with cash prizes right in the middle of the festival grounds.
It honestly sounds like a chaotic fraternity party. Why is this professionally valuable to a career?
Because sociologically, it is a massive, high-stakes networking nexus disguised as a fraternity party.
Disguised networking.
Human beings do business with people they like and trust. When you are standing at a beer pong table with a veteran talent manager, or bonding over a mutual hangover with the host of a top 10 comedy podcast, you are forging the informal personal relationships that actually define the entertainment industry.
It's the difference between cold emailing a resume to HR and having a beer with the hiring manager.
Exactly. This is where mentorships are born organically. This is the exact environment where an established touring headliner watches you handle yourself off stage, decides, hey, I like this kid's energy, they aren't weird or needy, and invites you to open for them on the road for the next 6 months.
That's how it happens.
The sources emphasize that direct, formal applications rarely advance a career. It is those arm's-length endorsements, a podcaster mentioning your name on an episode, a headliner vouching for you in a green room, that serve as the actual engines of career progression.
Okay. Wow. I am absorbing all of this. And if I am putting myself in the shoes of an aspiring comic listening right now, my head is absolutely spinning.
It's a lot of information.
Let me level with you. Based on everything we just covered, it sounds like to be a successful stand-up comedian in 2026, I have to be a dual language, audio syncing tech wizard to produce my submission tapes.
Right.
I have to be a master of TikTok SEO and algorithm manipulation to build an audience. I have to be a hyper-organized logistical project manager to book my independent tours. And on top of all that, I have to be an extroverted beer pong playing party animal to network at festivals.
It sounds impossible.
What if I just want to write jokes? What if I'm just an introverted writer who is terrified of networking? Is there a place for me in 2026?
That is the ultimate paralyzing dilemma of the modern creator economy. The demands placed on a single artist are mathematically impossible to sustain alone. You will burn out.
Okay, so what's the solution?
This brings us full circle, right back to the very first concept we discussed today. The layered career model, and specifically your Proximate Layer clique.
The comedy buddies.
The secret to surviving 2026 is realizing that you do not have to be a master of all these domains yourself, but you must be part of a team that covers them. You lean on your comedy buddies.
Oh, it's like forming an Avengers team of open micers.
That is exactly what it is. Look at your immediate circle. Maybe you are a brilliant, introverted joke writer who understands narrative structure better than anyone, but you freeze up and have a panic attack when you look at video editing software.
Sure.
But your comedy buddy is a massive tech nerd who perfectly understands how to sync board audio to high-def video in Premiere.
You trade.
So you trade skills. You help them punch up the structure of their closing joke, and in return, they edit your festival tape.
That's brilliant.
Maybe the third person in your clique isn't the strongest writer yet, but they are incredibly charismatic and naturally great at the extroverted networking required at the hang. They are the one who pulls you into the conversation with the booker at the after party.
So the DIY revolution doesn't actually mean do it alone.
No, absolutely not. It means do it with your community. You and your Proximate clique effectively become the production company, the digital marketing agency, and the talent roster, all rolled into one cooperative unit.
You build your own agency.
You fill in each other's gaps. That is how you survive the logistical demands without losing your artistic sanity.
So if you are listening to this right now and you are staring at the ashes of the old comedy map, what is the ultimate 2026 blueprint we are extracting from all these sources?
It looks like a four-step cycle.
Let's summarize it. Step 1.
First, you build your safety net. You find your Proximate clique to survive the psychological meat grinder of the open mic scene, pooling your resources and workshopping in the safety of your collective sandbox.
The car riffing. Step 2.
Second, you step into the community layer and actively refine your stagecraft. You stop reading off your phone, you master the funny muscle, and you learn to perform with the audience, making every show a bespoke, exclusive experience through names and yes and connectivity.
Like Brenda from accounting. Okay, step 3.
Third, you fully embrace the digital hustle. You stop waiting for gatekeepers and you utilize platforms like TikTok, not as a billboard for your ego, but as a search engine to provide authentic connection.
Providing value.
Right, pulling back the curtain on your journey to find your specific, highly dedicated audience.
For specific weirdos. And step 4.
And fourth, you operate with pristine logistical professionalism. You respect the psychology of the booker, you master the 60-second tape, you secure fire audio, you hit the 10-second punchline, you use a professional email, and when you finally get the invite to the festival, you understand that the real work happens offstage during the hang.
The beer pong networking.
Exactly. And through it all, you never view it as a ladder. You constantly loop back through the layers, yo-yoing down to test new material and bringing your original friends up with you.
It is, without question, an incredibly demanding and exhausting path.
It is not for the faint of heart.
But the trade-off is profound, isn't it? It is also more democratic, more transparent, and more artist-controlled than at any point in the history of entertainment.
Yeah.
You no longer have to sit in the dark waiting to be chosen by a network executive.
You have the tools to choose yourself.
That is genuinely inspiring. But as we wrap up this deep dive, putting all these pieces together leaves me with a slightly unsettling, provocative thought about where this is all heading.
Uh-oh. Where are we heading?
Well, if you're building your career on this new blueprint, if the future of comedy relies so heavily on independent, self-booking, decentralized TikTok community building and performing in alternative DIY spaces where the artist completely controls the revenue, what exactly happens to the traditional comedy clubs by 2030?
Wow. That's a massive question.
Right. Will the classic brick-and-mortar clubs, with their strict two-drink minimums, just become expensive tourist museums, strictly hosting the established aging superstars?
Well, the real, raw, dangerous, and innovative comedy lives entirely in the indie theaters, the podcast studios, and the DIY spaces that you and your specific weirdos create for yourselves.
Exactly.
It is a fascinating structural shift to consider. The tectonic plates are moving.
So think about where you want to build your stage, because in 2026, the old map is gone, but the hammer and nails are sitting right in your hands.